I will no longer be writing Berkshire's annual report or talking endlessly at the annual meeting. As the British would say, I am going quiet. This one line from the Oracle of Omaha in his farewell letter to shareholders on 10th November didn't just appear on the page. It arrived like a storm carrying centuries of history on its back. For nearly 6 decades, Warren Buffett's letter weren't just shareholder updates. They were annual masterclasses in capitalism, character, and common sense. Each one blended arithmetic with philosophy, turning the language of balance sheets into real life lessons. And now, sadly, the teacher is settling down his pen. For decades, Buffett taught us that wealth was a byproduct, not a goal, and that compounding applies as much to kindness as it does to capital. Buffett didn't just teach us how to make money, he taught us to remain sane while trying to generate the best outcome for each rupee invested. In his farewell letter, Warren Buffett distilled his 90 plus years of life into a few pages, leaving behind a treasure trove of lessons that continue to inspire. In this video, we will dive into the gems that Warren Buffett shared in his final letter or the farewell letter to shareholders. Buffett starts the letter with his childhood, talking about how he was as a child. He shares an incident where he was admitted to the hospital for a surgery, and one fine day his curiosity took over. He decided to take fingerprints of all the nurses that used to attend him. And you know what was the reason? The reason was that he believed that if he had those fingerprints with him, and in case any of these nurses turn bad, the CBI would call him and ask him for help in solving the case. Of course, that childhood fantasy never became a reality. But it said something deeper about Buffett even back then. His love for collecting information, solving puzzles, and paying attention to the smallest of details. Moving forward, Buffett calls himself a lucky man. It might sound unusual, right? He writes, and I quote, I was born in 1930, healthy, reasonably intelligent, white, male, and in America. Wow, thank you, Lady Luck. This line from his final letter sums up a truth most people never admit. Success isn't only about effort, it's also about being at the right place at the right time. Buffett never ignored luck. In fact, he appreciated it with gratitude. Practically thinking, a successful and a wealthy person like Warren Buffett could have built his business anywhere in the world. It could have been New York, it could have been London, or it could have been Silicon Valley as well. But instead, he chose to build his empire in Omaha, Nebraska, a place most investors couldn't even point on a map. This was the place where he bought his first and the only home back in 1958. He goes on to say that he still drives on the same roads, eats the same dinner, and works out of the same modest office building that he occupied in 1960. Being far from market's chaos gave him the clarity to think long term and the discipline to avoid trends. So, if you see, Omaha wasn't a limitation for Buffett. In fact, it was his edge. He said, and I quote again, I feel that both Berkshire and I did better because of our base in Omaha than if I would have resided anywhere else. He further wrote, the center of the United States was a very good place to be born, raise a family, and build a business. After talking about his hometown, Buffett talked about a few remarkable companions he has had throughout his life. He starts by talking about his closest ally, none other than late Charlie Munger, who lived just a few blocks away surprisingly. But as luck would have it, they didn't meet at that time at all. But later, when they met, it built a 64-year-long friendship that was based on trust, humor, and brutal honesty. Buffett referred to Charlie Munger as a teacher and a protective big brother. He also went on to say that they had differences but never had an argument. Now that's beautiful, isn't it? Having a 64-year-long partnership, or I would say friendship, with somebody whom you look up to as your teacher, your guide, and most importantly, a protective big brother. Munger was not just a business partner, as we all know. He was a mirror to Buffett's mind, sharpening it, challenging it, and referring to the principles that made Berkshire legendary. In fact, their relationship became a masterclass in how shared values matter more than shared opinions. Continuing to talk about companions, Buffett also referred to remarkable individuals like Don Cogg, Walter Scott, Stan Lipsey, Ajit Jain, and Greg Abel, who is going to be his successor. These were not just business relationships, they were lifelong bonds rooted in respect. Now, this tells us something extremely unusual about big businessmen. Buffett's world was not built on contracts, it was built on character. The biggest lesson here is to choose the right people and stick with them. And remember, Buffett always says you cannot make a good deal with a bad person. Profound, isn't it? Towards the latter half of his letter, he talks about a brutal fact of life: mortality. Simultaneously, he also shows how graciously he has accepted this fact. In his evergreening, joking manner, he shares the fact that he has outlived almost everyone from his family so far, but also made an ironic acceptance that his eyesight is now fading and his balance is not the same as it was before. He further went on to reflect how luck has followed him all his life, admitting that fortune had dealt him a few great hands others don't get. But he also reminded us that luck isn't fair. Luck isn't fair. He went on to say that there are many brilliant, honest, and kind people who never got the same shot. Gratitude, he implied, is the least a lucky person can offer. While reading, here is where you will confront the brutal fact of mortality. Time humbles everyone, isn't it? No matter how rich, how wise you are, it spares absolutely no balance sheet, no empire, no ego at all. The reminder for all of us is that every year we keep learning, which is a dividend from time itself. And if we are lucky enough to keep receiving it every year, we should make sure that it is used in the best way possible. In the final part of his letter, he wears the hat of a businessman, something he does best, right? So he wears the hat of a business leader and shares that he is quite confident about Berkshire's future. He also adds that Greg Abel, his successor, is the right man to lead the organization. He is a fast learner, an honest communicator, and someone who understands Berkshire's vast web even better than Warren Buffett today. That's not a small feat to achieve, right? After mentioning this fact, he turns philosophical and says that leadership for him was never about charisma. It was always about character. Character is the word. Further, he adds that over the next century, Over the next century, Berkshire should only need 5 to 6 CEOs, and calmly, in his evergreen tone, calmly assures investors that the principle of longevity through discipline is here to say is here to stay even after he formally steps down. While talking about business and Berkshire in particular, he also shares a brutal fact about equity investing. He said that Berkshire stock will sometimes fall by 50% going forward as well, as it has happened 3 times during his own tenure. But he assured again that one should not worry, as he believes that America will come back and so will Berkshire shares. Warren Buffett closes his letter by saying that he feels better about the second half of his life than the first one, and shares a couple of easy, simple, yet extremely profound advices. Firstly, he mentions don't dwell on mistakes. Rather, learn, move on, and choose your heroes wisely. This is the advice Professor Sanjay Bakshi gave me during my formative years when I met him as a beginner who was, just trying to understand what equities looked like and was just taking the first step into equity investing. Anyhow, the second piece of advice that he shares with all of us is that kindness is costless, but at the same time, it's also priceless. If we try to look at Warren Buffett and all his activities very closely, we get a view that for him, greatness was never about money, fame, or power. It was about decency, it was about helping someone in any of those thousand quiet ways that never make to the headlines. He reminds all of us that cleaning lady in an organization is as much a human being as the chairman. And that golden rule still beats any management theory ever written. Now, that's the essence of Warren Buffett, right? A man who built an empire worth billions and still chose to end his story with a reminder that it's character and not capital that truly compounds over time. Thanks for watching.